everybody. This is Eve Ewing. I'm the curator of the Black Freedom Lecture Series. And before we get started with our amazing talk this week, there are two things I want to remind you to do. The first thing is, if you are not already signed up for our newsletter, you definitely want to do that. It's how you're going to find out about all of our incredible speakers and enter a raffle to win books and find out about questions and readings and all the cool stuff. So go to our website, blackfreedomlectures.org/newsletter, and sign up if you haven't done that already. The second thing is, we would really love this to be a collective learning experience. So if you haven't done so already, we encourage you to get together with a squad, a group of friends, or just one friend. Hook up with somebody and say, hey, I'm watching this thing, I'm reading this stuff, and I would love to have some conversations with you about it. Get together so that this is not a thing we're doing alone. That's it. Welcome. Really geeked to have you, and let's get into it.
I am joining you all virtually from the occupied land traditionally stewarded by the Massachusetts, the Wampanoag, and the Pawtucket, also known as Boston, Massachusetts. I was really moved by Tupili's non-land acknowledgement, in which Tupili and fellow elders made clear that land acknowledgements are not enough, and that it helps white supremacy to relax. I do not want to help white supremacy relax. But when it comes to the internet and hashtag activism, it can be easy to forget that there's hardware that runs all over this stolen land that connects our digital devices, and that this hardware is made from minerals extracted from stolen land and mined by exploited people around the world. As I talk today, there are three things I want to make sure you take away from my talk. Hashtag activism is a tool that can help us organize for the world we want. 2, hashtag activism can hide the disabilities of the Black people it hopes to serve. 3, hashtag activism can lead to disabilities in Black communities. Hashtag activism is a term that first appeared in news coverage in 2011. It describes the creation and successful spreading of online activism stamped with a hashtag. Amani Barbarin, who led the first part of Crip Camp last week, started the hashtag Ableds Are Weird, and Kia Brown, who led part 2 last week, talked about the community that grew up around her hashtag Disabled and Cute. Activist Melissa Thompson, who we will hear from later in the summer, is known for creating the hashtag Disability So White to talk about the way that racism is not discussed enough in disabled spaces. Her hashtag is used to mark tweets and other social media posts with a way to follow a conversation about racism and disability. Anyone who uses the hashtag attaches their tweet to the ongoing conversation, and anyone who clicks on the hashtag gets to see all of the content that the hashtag connects. These conversations support actions that change our world. They allow communities and networks to grow through the sharing of these hashtags. Content warning, I'm going to be talking about the murders of Black and disabled people in this next section. So if you would rather not hear this content, please come back in about 10 minutes. One of the most famous examples of hashtag activism is the hashtag Black Lives Matter. Black Lives Matter has been used to help document the murders of Black people by the police and the movement to stop that from happening. Black Lives Matter links other hashtags, particularly hashtags of the names of the people killed by the police. One name that came to our collective attention this summer is Elijah Mclean. On August 27, 2019, Elijah Mclean was walking home from a convenience store in Aurora, Colorado. Someone called 911 to report a suspicious person. Elijah often wore a ski mask because he had anemia, which made him feel cold. This ski mask alarmed the anonymous caller. Elijah was stopped by police. He reached down to turn his music off as he had his earbuds in, and the officers reacted as though he had a weapon. The officers claimed Elijah was resisting arrest when they put him in a carotid hold that cut off his air supply. Elijah was so scared by the way they interacted with him, he threw up and apologized to the officers for doing so. Elijah eventually passed out because he couldn't breathe, and emergency medical responders gave him the drug ketamine to revive him, but instead, this sent him into cardiac arrest. He was rushed to the hospital, but was considered brain dead and was taken off life support 3 days later on August 30th. Elijah was just 23 years old. Elijah liked to play his violin to shelter dogs and cats to calm them down. He was known to friends and family as an introvert and very sensitive, though his family had not identified him as disabled. However, given the statistics of people murdered by the police, it is very likely that Elijah had a disability. People involved with organizing around Black Lives Matter are encouraging their cities to defund the police. Disability justice activist Leroy Moore reminds us not to forget that over 70% of police shootings are people with disabilities, and not only people with mental health disabilities. So these funds should come back to the disabled community, especially the Black disabled community. Don't leave us out, Leroy says. Leroy makes the important connection between efforts to defund the police and the need for those funds to be redistributed to Black disabled community, especially since it is Black disabled people who are disproportionately being murdered by the police. Slide, and then slide. Thank you. Elijah Mclean became a household name months after being killed in Colorado because of the murder of George Floyd by Minneapolis police officer Derek Chauvin. Officer Chauvin used his knee to slowly choke George Floyd to death. Elijah was also killed because he was not allowed to breathe by officers. Twitter users used the hashtags Elijah Mclean and George Floyd to connect their murders through tweets. Slide. Thank you. The name Brianna Taylor is sometimes added to this list of hashtags. On March 13th, Brianna Taylor was asleep with her boyfriend when the police raided her home with a no-knock warrant in Louisville, Kentucky. The police killed her in her bed, shooting her 8 times. None of the officers have been charged for her murder. I am a prison abolitionist. That means I do not think that prisons and jails are helpful in creating a world with less harm. That said, I do find it interesting that calls for justice, including locking up the police officers who murdered Brianna Taylor, are not taken as seriously as they are when a Black man has been killed by the police. Brianna's murder has received less attention than the murder of George Floyd. People have tried to engage in clever hashtag activism to try and get people to pay attention to Brianna's death, including creating a recipe for chicken soup that ends with "Arrest the cops that killed Brianna Taylor." People have also posted a picture of houseplants where the plants are named "Arrest the cops who killed Brianna Taylor." While these strategies may call attention to the fact that the cops have not been arrested, they do not provide readers with the tools to advocate for Brianna Taylor. There is no number to call or pledge to sign. That is not successful hashtag activism. People want to make sure that Brianna's story is told because so often Black women murdered by the police do not get the same attention that Black men murdered by the police get in the media. The hashtag Say Her Name was started by a group of Black feminists to bring attention to the Black women who were killed by the police, who were largely being ignored by the media. People use this hashtag to make sure we say the names of Black, cis, and trans women who are murdered by the police. Say Her Name has been an important form of hashtag activism because it makes sure that Black women are not forgotten. Unfortunately, Black women and Black disabled people make up a lot of the people killed by the police, and it is not talked about enough. As Leroy Moore says, we have to be careful not to let our organizing erase the fact that a disproportionate number of Black people killed by the police are disabled. Marcus Davis Peters was tased, shot, and killed by police during a mental health crisis in May of 2018 in Richmond, Virginia. He was 24 years old. Freddie Gray, 25 years old, was killed by a rough ride in Baltimore and had a developmental disability. His death sparked the Baltimore uprising of 2015. Sandra Bland allegedly died by suicide in her Waller County, Texas jail in 2015 and had epilepsy and depression. Eric Garner had asthma, diabetes, and a heart condition when he was strangled by the New York Police Department in 2014. For Black disabled people, defunding the police is a matter of life and death. All of these deaths have been popularized through hashtag activism, but often the disabilities of these victims of police violence are left out of the story. Hashtags have helped people organize protests and call for change. They have pushed prosecutors to indict some of these cops, but they haven't been used to fully address how Black disabled people are more likely to be targeted by the police. A lot of Black people don't identify as disabled, despite having disabilities. Sometimes our communities think it is helpful for us not to be further stigmatized by disability when we are trying to talk about police violence in our communities. This does not help us. It is important to name that Black disabled people are more likely to be killed by the police. It helps to destigmatize disability and can help us better advocate for Black people with disabilities in our communities. It is also the case that police violence can disable us. For those of us who do survive near fatal interactions with police, we can often end up with new disabilities, like blindness, no longer being able to walk, and post-traumatic stress disorder. We haven't talked in Crip Camp yet about how people acquire their disabilities. And I think it is important to think about the way that disability can be acquired through racist and capitalist violence. For example, 35,000 Congolese children negotiate dangerous working conditions that impair their health as Western consumers enjoy the fruits of their debilitating labor. To fight for their own rights using hashtag activism in the West. These children are mining for coltan and are exposed to toxic dust in the process. They sell their coltan to Chinese distributors who export and refine the mineral in China, then sell it to tech companies to power our digital devices, such as smartphones, laptops, and tablets. These Black children become disabled through this mining process and are not included in the important hashtag activism happening in the United States that addresses ableism. As my research develops, I hope to be in collaboration with those organizing within the mineral mines of the Congo. In writer Alice Walker's classic text, "We are the ones we have been waiting for," inner light in a time of darkness. She writes, quote, "This is a time when consciousness really requires that we connect, that we don't just say, oh, that's them over there. Because the other part of consciousness now is to understand that there are no other people anywhere. They are all here on the planet. We are us, and that's it." Like Alice Walker, I think we are all just degrees of separation from one another. Building solidarity across disabilities, continents, and countries is essential if humans are to survive on this planet. By remaining attentive to people involved in hashtag activism, even those behind the scenes who mine the minerals that power our technology, we can create a process that does not cause harm, or at least reduces it. We can make sure to honor the disabilities of Black people killed by the police, and we can also work to make sure that the people who mine the minerals and build the technology that powers our technology are not harmed in that process. We need a new ethic around the pace of life that doesn't allow capitalism to be the driving force of our decision-making as a species. The pace of life is something humans can control. We must pivot and change the way we relate to each other.